Need a hat, I guess. Oh, perfect. You can hear me. If you can't hear me at some point, let me know. Um, Thanks for being here, Susan. We'll get started and maybe people will join it and maybe they'll watch it on YouTube. But um, I don't want to do this. As you know, um, I feel like I have to do it. And you can maybe relate to that. This is not my favorite thing, but it feels like there's a lot going on and we should try to do something. So that's what we've been trying to do. And I know, Susan, I know you've been part of it for the last 6 months. And I'll just give a quick, we're going to go faster than what I was doing on Instagram. So I'll explain what I've been doing on Instagram and why I've been doing it. And then we're going to cut real fast to the finish line. I have been a hospice chaplain for 15 years. I love it. I started off doing it in Chicago for 12 years, and then I moved to Oklahoma 3 years ago, and I've been doing a hospice chaplaincy for the last 3 years here. And I have enjoyed it since I started, but things have gotten interesting the last decade, right? And I think everybody feels like a little bit helpless. At least that's how I feel. Like, what are we doing about what's going on? And you may be seeing posts. I've seen posts like this that say something along the lines of, if you were alive, if you wondered what you would be doing during the Holocaust, you're probably doing it right now. It seems a little extreme. This is not my favorite thing to do. I am doing this sort of out of obligation, and maybe you can relate to that or understand that. Like, what are we doing? We got to do something. It seems like Christian nationalism is soaring in this country. And as a result, a lot of folks who grew up going to church are leaving the church. And I know a lot of young people are coming. We're going to talk about that. But there's a lot of folks in my generation who have left the church. And the reason that I know that is because I've been asking. So as a hospice chaplain, when I go see somebody for the first time, and I know I've said this before in some of the other videos, but when I see somebody for the first time, when they come on service, I have 5 days to see them to do my initial spiritual assessment. In that initial spiritual assessment, I have to ask what their religious background is. I did not have to do this in Chicago. It's a part of the paperwork here in Oklahoma. I never really like asking it, but I have to ask, and they'll say, I'm Catholic, or I'm Baptist, or I'm Lutheran, or I don't go to church, whatever the case may be. But I have to ask it. I have to put something on that line in order to go to the next screen. And since I've had to do that, people have given me their responses. They'll say, I'm Baptist, I go to this church, I've been going there for 50 years, I love it, I have a small group, the pastor is great, wonderful. Probably half the people or more say something like that. But a lot of folks say, well, I was raised Lutheran or I was raised Catholic, but I stopped going 20 or 30 years ago. And starting about 3 years ago, it was exactly 3 years ago in August, it'll be 3 years ago that I started to follow up. When they said, I don't go, I would say, what made you stop going? Why don't you go? And I remember the first time I had this conversation 3 years ago. It was fascinating. I was talking to a gentleman. I remember it like it was yesterday. And he said, he gave me his response why he doesn't go. And I kind of made a mental note of that and wrote it down. And then I got to the next, a week later, I had another conversation and they gave me a different reason why they didn't go. And I started to sort of keep track of why folks don't go or stopped going. And it was kind of a fascinating project. I finished it a few months ago. So a lot has happened in the last few months and I haven't really been asking that question. I still ask it, but I haven't been keeping track of people's responses. And the responses, there was probably 20 different reasons that people didn't go, but I kept track of ones that people gave me multiple times. So for example, church hurt. That's the number 3 reason that I think number 2 or 3 reason that people don't go. They were part of a church. For some reason, something happened in that church that hurt them emotionally, and so they stopped going. The number 4 or 5 reason I think is money. People, they felt like the church was either always asking for money or that the church was corrupt. It was taking all this money from folks and then doing stuff with it that they didn't approve of, so they stopped going for that reason. That was reason number 4. Reason number 5, I think, was politics. Reason number 3 was, I don't know. there was a whole lot of people that said I stopped going to church, and I would say, "What made you stop going?" And they would say, "I don't know. I don't know why." Um, so I've kept track of those things, and I have tried to think of what we could do, why they're happening, and what we could do better. Um, Other reasons, I've been on Instagram. I've been trying to go through. My plan was to go through one at a time and explain each one. One of the reasons was the LGBTQ community. That was reason number 7, I think. Um, Someone that was in that community or had a family member or a friend that was in that community and stopped going because of the church's handling of that community, or they didn't feel welcome at the church, and so they stopped going. So that's another example. There was 13, and my plan on Instagram was to go through one at a time, all 13 reasons, and explain how, after giving it some thought, how I think that we went wrong as a church and how I think we could do better. So the goal has always been to offer a solution. Um, and this is it. This is what we came up with after a few years of taking in people's reasonings for why they don't go, considering those and trying to offer some solutions. One of them, like I said, was number 4. The number 4 reason was money. So I have heard this reason a lot, and I have given it quite a bit of thought, and that's why there will be no money. I've seen on TikTok before. I don't know anything about social media, which you can tell. I had to buy a microphone for this, which I'm not happy about. There will be no money involved. So if there's some way to like tap and gift something, please do not do that. Money is a big problem in the church, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other people. I will never ask anybody for money or try to sell merchandise or try to get you to buy something from me ever. So if somebody donates, first of all, I wouldn't know how to get it off of TikTok anyway, because I am new to social media. Secondly, I think it's a big problem, money and corruption and financial issues within the church. And we'll talk about them kind of at length. My plan was to talk about it when we get to number 4 and to explain what people said, why I think it's a problem, and how we can do better. So I think we've come up with a solution. I think we've come up with a solution for all of those things, taking them all into consideration and tried to make something that would make anyone feel welcome. As I said before we started here, there are some folks that I don't think will love it here. Folks that are very plugged into a church, that are involved with their church, and they love their church. They will likely be not be thrilled with what we discuss here, because it's going to be a harsh critique of church in a lot of ways. And I know there's a lot of good churches, so I want to be very careful not to be too broad. There are a lot of churches that people are plugged into that are doing things the right way and that are financially transparent, that are biblically sound, that I think are doing things the right way. So I don't mean to say that those churches don't exist, but they seem few and far between. Now we have, I think, in my conversations with people, if you take 100 churches, you have 5 of them that are sort of Christian nationalists, like outright Christian nationalist churches, and you'll have 5 that are the opposite, very all-inclusive and affirming churches, very progressive churches. So you have kind of 5 on each side, and then 90 in the middle that are silent on all of the topics that are going on. And I don't know how we can do that, how we can afford to do that anymore with things that are happening in the world and in our country. I don't know how a church or a pastor would not address some of the things that are going on. I feel like we have to. So we're going to talk about things that are difficult to talk about, and we'll see where that gets us. Just a little bit about myself. So I mentioned that I'm a hospice chaplain. That's really all I've done in my professional career. I had successfully avoided social media for 15 years. I got social media last year around this time. Here's a little backstory of why I got it. Not that it matters, but a year ago, my mom was not well, and my dad was home by himself. She was in a memory care facility. My dad was home by himself, and he would send us, my brothers and me, he would send some social media clips, some clips from Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and I couldn't watch them because I didn't have any social media. And eventually I started to feel guilty that he would send these and my brothers would respond and I couldn't see them. So I downloaded these things against my better judgment, because I knew that they would suck up my time, and that, like, I have an addictive personality, so I knew, like everybody else, it would consume me. That's why I didn't do it for the first 15 years or however many years since Facebook started. I successfully avoided social media. But I've had it for the last year, and as a result, I've thought, well, I might as well try to do something productive with it. So the first thing I did ties into this church. I did a page on Instagram called Read the Bible 3. It was the first thing I did, because I had a few folks in my life that were like, I love to read the Bible. I'd love to try reading the Bible, but I can't do it. I can't understand it. I've tried before, and it's confusing. And I tried the Bible in a year and fell apart when I got to Leviticus or Deuteronomy or something, and then you crap out, and then you feel guilty, and so you're less likely to try to read it. So I made some videos on Read the Bible 3 on an Instagram page to try to help people, anybody that wanted to try reading the Bible, to give a little bit of guidance on to here's how you can do it, and hopefully how you can do it successfully. That came as a result of reason number 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of fly through those reasons. My plan was to do one reason a week for 13 weeks, and then explain how I think this formula that we have makes for a better church, or a good church. I don't know about better. But time is a factor, I feel like. So I don't want to take all the time that I was going to on Instagram to go through this carefully and one at a time, and take until a year from now to get through all that. Things seem a bit more urgent now with this rise of Christian nationalism. And we're going to talk about what that is. If you're like, I'm not familiar with Christian nationalism, it's essentially the idea that we would like to see the government become a Christian government, and implement Christian policies and theology and things into our lives, whether we like it or not. There's talk in Oklahoma of, I think they already have it, the Bible in public schools, things like that. That's the goal of Christian nationalism, is to make this country a Christian country. And they'll say things. I see some hearts. Just a reminder, I don't know anything about TikTok. If that's like a gift or something, please don't do that. I'll explain why. But we are vehemently opposed to any giving or money. I love the love, but money is, I think, a net negative in the church. We'll discuss that in a little bit. So I had the first conversation about this 3 years ago. There was a gentleman that I visited. I was visiting his wife, and he said he stopped going to church because of some biblical issues. And he said the church doesn't teach the Bible anymore. Churches don't teach the Bible anymore. And I thought he must have some weird theology that he doesn't think churches are teaching. But he didn't. He just said, I don't think anybody reads the Bible or teaches the Bible. And I thought that was interesting. So I decided to ask, and I asked very carefully. I asked in a non-judgmental way. I asked church-going Christians if they read their Bible with any degree of regularity. That's the exact phrase that I used, with any degree of regularity. Not every day or every week or every month, just with any degree of regularity. And I asked, over the course of 2.5 years, I asked 127 church-going Christians if they read the Bible with any degree of regularity. And five of them said yes. 5 out of 127, which was, so I thought it would be like 40 or something like that. I don't say this with judgment. I don't read as much as I would like to either. So I don't say this. It may sound like I'm judgmental at points of our conversation tonight, but I don't say that judgmentally. It's just nearly nobody reads the Bible with any degree of regularity, which starts to make sense. That was reason number 10, was churches don't teach the Bible. That was reason number 10, but it was the first reason I heard. It was in August, 3 years ago, next month, August of 2022. That's when I started asking the question. And as you see the other issues fall into place, you realize that makes sense. When you see Christian nationalist pastors talking about how empathy is toxic or sinful, that is a message you can sell so long as folks are biblically illiterate. So if you read one of the Gospels, the Gospel of Matthew, for example, you read through that once and you go to a church that tells you that empathy is a sin or is toxic, you will see that's not what I just read. everything I just read about Jesus, he was empathetic throughout his entire ministry. So this idea of empathy being toxic or being sinful um, is is hard. It's hard to sell to a biblically literate group of people. It's easy to sell if people are unfamiliar with Jesus or his teachings. And it kind of snowballed from there. I got it, like I said, I got issues, or I got responses that people stopped going because of lots of other issues. I want to recognize that I am not a pioneer in my efforts to speak out against Christian nationalism. There are pastors, even on social media platforms, that are ahead of me. They've been doing this for a year, or longer. Um, some churches, like I said, have also been speaking about it all along. So I'm not an explorer. I'm just joining a small team of people that are speaking out against Christian nationalism because I think it's necessary. Like I said, I don't want to do it. Life was easier for me when I was just a hospice chaplain. I feel like obligated to do something. So this is what we've come up with to do. There are also lots of voices that I've seen both in real life and on social media who are speaking out against Christian nationalism. I feel the need to, I feel an obligation to, because of the way I look. Most Christian nationalist pastors are like me, right? So, and the issues that come from this patriarchal society are kind of done by me and folks that look like me. So when you hear women or black folks or whoever talking about Christian nationalism, it's effective and it's great that they're speaking out against us. But this is our fight. This is our problem to solve. This is, I think, our issue. And so I'm in. I know that there's other folks on here. Maybe you know some of them or have listened to some of them that are speaking out against Christian nationalism. And I am just joining that team. That's how I think of this. I am doing it out of a passion for the gospel. It seems that Christian nationalism has sort of hijacked Christianity as a whole. So a lot of folks that I talk to are no longer even if they're still believers, if they're still Christians, they don't use the term Christian because of that connotation. They use the term follower of Jesus or follower of Christ or follower of the way, I've heard before. But they're steering clear of the term Christian. And I understand that. I had a friend early on in this. I had this conversation with a couple buddies of mine 2.5 years ago, and their recommendation was, don't call this a church. If you see, like, if somebody scrolls by and see Reconsider Church, you may think, no, thank you. I'm familiar with church. I tried church. I did church. I'm out. I'm aware of what church is all about, and I want no part of it. The irony is that this church is what is for those people. And so the recommendation was, call it something else, call it something other than a church. My problem with that was, and still is, we just are sort of surrendering, right? The Christian nationalists take the flag, they take the church, they take the term Christian, they take the ability to post Bible verses. If all I did on here was post Bible verses all day long, people would have a pretty good idea. People would assume what this page is about, and I think 99 out of 100 times they would be right. It's hard for me. I feel like a frustration with surrendering the term church. So I'm like, yeah, I understand people have left the church for really good reasons. Like I said, church hurt. If people were hurt by the church for one way or another, and they are out, I understand. But this is a community that we're trying to build for folks like that. I think what has happened is, as the church has moved in the direction of Christian nationalism, a lot of folks my age and a little older and a little younger have left the church. But they're still Christians, but they're isolated. They're doing their Christian life, their walk with Jesus privately. It's just an individual thing, and that's not necessarily wrong. But just because Christian nationalism has kind of hijacked Christianity doesn't mean that we can't have any kind of community. So it's for those reasons that I felt like, let's try to do something. And this is what we have come up with. After you go through all of those reasons. And like I said, I will still go through them one at a time. There may be some people that watch this video because we were talking about issue number 7, the LGBTQ community and the church's response to that community. And I have quite a bit of experience. I have quite a bit of conversations with people. I don't feel equipped to do this project. I don't have a burning desire to do this project. I am not a pastor, so you will find pastors who are much more well-spoken, much more well-read as far as they're reading all the current stuff and they've read a lot more. I studied this stuff under a great group of professors a long time ago, and did what's called a Master's of Divinity. So I feel qualified and I feel prepared in a sense that I've had a lot of these conversations. But what I feel like I bring is a little bit different than a pastor, because my whole career has been talking with people at the end of life. And the last 3 years has been talking with them about their experiences with church, and keeping track of negative experiences with church. And I think if somebody is familiar with this church, they would already know that. But there's three elements to this, to Reconsider Church. They are reading the Bible, praying for each other, and doing something to help somebody in need. And we have done that each month. There has been a handful of people, which is excellent, that have signed up to read a book of the Bible. And I don't ask them, hey, are you keeping up? Did you read, or what chapter are you on, or did you finish? Because I want to get rid of the guilt and shame of, like, I committed to reading the book of Luke and I crapped out at chapter 7 and Ryan's going to be disappointed or going to shame somebody or whatever. I want to get rid of all of that. So just read the Bible. Let's pick a book, read it together, read it with your spouse if you want, or with one of your children. It will build a community. I think that's been my experience. It will build a community. So try it with one of your children or with your spouse. Say, hey, we want to try to read the book of Mark with me, or the book of John, whatever it is, wherever you decide to start. Read it together. It takes about 4 minutes a day. You can listen to it on your phone. You can go to Read the Bible 3 on Instagram if you need help with where to start, how to read it, or if I can answer questions, I would be happy to do that. But it's been interesting to see how things have fallen into place. I got a message this morning from a friend of mine, and I put it on Instagram, but it just said something along the lines of, we need to be biblically literate for what's ahead. I don't know if we are. I understand what Christian nationalism is doing and how much progress they have made. I am not an expert on politics, and I probably get the same videos sent to me that many people on here get. I think it seems as though we are either heading toward fascism or already there. And if that is the case, we've seen this before. We've seen Christian nationalism latch on to fascist regimes just in church history. This is an area that I love. And there was a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Some of you are familiar with him, but he was a German minister, a Lutheran minister in Germany, who carved out a lane for himself. It was called the Confessing Church. But he broke off from what was going on in Germany in the 40s and made his own. He and a few others founded this Confessing Church. And that's what I would love this to be. If in fact we are heading for fascism, I would want to be Dietrich Bonhoeffer in that scenario. Even though it didn't end well for him, it was a miserable finish for that guy, and he was my age. I'm 43. I was raised in a church that I am very grateful for. I was raised in a church that taught us scripture well enough to know that if you say empathy is a sin, or we shouldn't really love people, or what does it mean to love people, I hear that a lot. I was, from a young age, both in my household, I was taught by awesome parents what it means to follow Jesus and to care about others and to love others. And I was taught in my church as well growing up. And I am grateful for that. I know that a lot of people had bad experiences in churches, like I said, but mine was excellent. Mine was excellent to the point where now I can't um, reconcile what's going on with the gospel that I learned. Um, so we're breaking off and trying to carve out something new. I don't know if it'll be a lot of people or 3 people, and I'm okay with it either way. I don't even know if Confessing Church that Bonhoeffer started was big or successful, but it was right, I think. Um, so that's how I got to this point today. We're going to try to read the Bible, discern it as best we can, discern truth. Truth has been a fascinating thing. I have, like I said, I'm new to social media, and you see stuff on social media. I don't know if you've had this experience. Probably you have, if you've been on social media longer than I have, where you can't really tell what's true and what's not. So, and I get this from other people, from family members in my life, where they will send me a clip of something that seems kind of outrageous, like Michael Jordan did this or that, or Rory McIlroy did this or that. I'm like, is that true? And I kind of look it up, and I'm like, that's not true, but it looked very real. And I wonder if that's going to get, I think that's going to get harder to discern what's true and what's not. So I think when I think of something like that, I think of passages. I think of when Christ said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I think that "I am the truth" is more relevant today than it's ever been, because it's getting harder to decipher the truth. I've had folks in my family send me something, and I say, "Is that true?" And they're like, "I don't know." And younger generations, I have nieces and nephews that just, if they look at social media, they just assume everything they see on there is not true, which is wild to me. I mean, it makes sense. But I first got burned a year ago. I got an email from Walmart that something that I ordered didn't go through with my credit card, and I put it back in, and it was someone just took my credit card information and bought a whole bunch of stuff. And I felt like an idiot. I'm like, that looked true to me. It said Walmart right on the right above where on the email. It had the symbol on there, and it said I owed something for shipping that I didn't pay, and I had just ordered from Walmart, so I thought it was true. So it's getting trickier I think, to decipher what is true and what is not. So when Christ says something like, "I am the truth," I think we're going to get to a point, especially if AI kind of takes off, where you're like, "I don't know what's true and what's not." Maybe his words were for this moment. Uh, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am still passionate about the gospel, and I know that a lot of us are. There's a lot of people that are like, "I'm out on church. I couldn't do church anymore because of this or that reason, but I still am passionate about the gospel." We shouldn't have to feel like we're doing it by ourselves, in my opinion. Let's form a community. Just because Christian nationalism has sort of hijacked the church and Christianity doesn't mean that we can't have community, if that makes sense. And so I think the best way to have community is those 3 things. I think that is how a church, I think the cornerstone of a church should be those 3 things: reading the Bible, praying, and doing something to help people. I think reading the Bible and prayer are the 2 ways to get to know the Lord more. If you want to get to know Jesus, or just you're intrigued, you're curious about him, even if you're not a believer. I mentioned before we started this that I would like anybody that would like to come join. I would love to have you, even if you're not a Christian, but you're like, yeah, I'll read about Jesus just because I'm curious and see what he's about. Yeah, read one of the Gospels. I'll join you. We'll read together. I can pray for you, or you can pray for me, or if that's not your thing, we don't have to do it. And when we're done, I think this is where people that weren't Christians will do something to help people. So we've been doing 4 things every month. And I know some of you may know this, but every month, my family is our church right now. I feel a lot of responsibility to lead this family in this regard. So every month we do one of 4 things. Every weekend we do one of them, and we do each of them every month, once a month. We go visit a senior living facility, the one that my mom was in. I take the kids there. That's free. We go and we give high fives and hugs, and we walk around and make everybody's day. We're there for 25 minutes, and it's a highlight of the week for those residents. And we do that one Sunday. The next Sunday we will go to, we've adopted a home at a foster home. There's a Tulsa boys home that we've sort of partnered with and adopted one of those, one of their homes, with several boys that are there. We take them dinner, and then we hang out with them. I take the kids to that too. I take the kids the 3rd Sunday, the kids pack a bag of lunch. They get brown bags, and they fill them with a sandwich and $5 and a banana and a bottle of water, and some cookies or something like that. And we pack those up and we drive around until they pick, my young ones pick who they want to give that lunch to. That's the third week. And the fourth week, we take some money. We have an elementary school that's 10 minutes from us that has students that have a negative balance on their. Can you hear me? Okay, I don't know if anybody's here still, but can you hear me with this thing? I don't know. If you can't, call me. But yeah, there's so much going on the screen. I can't pay attention to it. Sorry. But if you can't hear me, that'll be a problem. So let me know, I guess, if you can't hear me, or call me. Thank you, Susan. So the fourth Sunday, we take some money to this elementary school that has kids that have a negative balance. And I talked to the director of the dining services, or whatever her title is, because there are some students that have a negative balance because they have parents who don't pay attention, which could very well happen to me, that I just didn't put money in their accounts. But there are other students, several students, that don't have money in their accounts, and they don't have the ability to put money in their accounts. So we go. I can't take $1,000. That's the reality, but we take a little bit to put on on the balance, pay off their balance, or put money on the account of students who can't afford it. So those are the 4 things we do each month. And I feel like even if folks are not Christian, they would enjoy doing something like that, one of those 4 things each month. So that's what they're doing. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I have a lot more to say, and I want to be sensitive to time. I know it's already late. I didn't want to do this too late, but I have a whole lot more to say. If you want to hear it, I guess I will. I will address the church's response to the LGBTQ community, because I told the folks on Instagram that this is what that would be. So this is a little introduction of what it is that we're doing, and why. I had several folks that left the church because, like I said, they had a family member or somebody that was in the LGBTQ community, or they themselves were. And they stopped going because they didn't feel welcome at the church. And I realize this is a sensitive topic. So churches just have one stance or the other. They just say, we don't support that. That is sinful. According to the Bible, that is sinful. And so I'm sticking with the Bible, and we're not gonna, people are welcome here. They say you're welcome here, but you're kind of not. I had 2 separate couples that were told that they were welcome to be part of the church, and they went to the church for a year or 2 years, and then volunteered to do something. So like greeters, one was greeters, one was, I think, children's ministry. One couple went for a year, one couple went for 3 years. And then they were told when they tried to volunteer that they weren't allowed to do that because they were gay. So they left the church, and then I see them when they come to hospice, or one of their parents comes to hospice, and they share that with me. And so I already had my own thoughts on this topic, and I will share them for anyone that is interested in the theological background of why I think I would love to have anybody in that community as part of this, as part of Reconsider Church, part of our community. And the reality is, I think people that left for that reason also fall into category 3, which is church hurt. So these 13 reasons that we'll go through, or you can see them on Instagram. It's not just one or the other. There are a lot of people that have several of them that apply to them. But folks that were in the LGBTQ community and left also have some church hurt, in my opinion. And there's never an apology. The idea behind a church is that we never change our position, right? Like, I stick to the Bible. This is what the Bible says, and I stick to it. The problem with that is, historically, that doesn't go well. Like, we stuck to the Bible in 1845 when the Southern Baptist Convention formed to oppose the abolition of slavery. They were sticking to the Bible. They had 100 verses about slavery that they used to justify why we should keep slavery in place. So I don't want to do a whole history lesson, but the church gets it wrong at almost every turn. Women's suffrage, the they've opposed interracial marriage for some biblical reason that they pull verses out to try to use to say why there shouldn't be interracial marriage. Much of the white evangelical Christian church opposed the civil rights movement, and so I only say that because really in my heritage, at every point that we get it wrong when it comes to social issues. So when we started kind of attacking, which we've attacked for a long time, I had a chaplain in Chicago that's phenomenal that worked in this community a lot, that I learned a lot from. It stands to reason that if you were a betting man, we're getting this wrong as well, and we are. And so the question becomes, how am I confident saying that? And I've had this discussion as recently as 2 days ago. Someone was just like, well, if loving someone, if we should love this community, that doesn't mean we should affirm their sin, or we should be okay with their sin. And I have a whole bunch of problems with that. I hear this, love the sinner, hate the sin, a lot. I did a video about it a while ago that I'm just like, I loathe this phrase because I hear it all the time. Every time I hear it, it's about the LGBTQ community. When someone says, I love my church because it sticks to the Bible and it doesn't deviate from that, this is what they're talking about, this issue. And they pull verses either from Leviticus to make their case, or it's mentioned 3 times in the New Testament. It's mentioned in Romans 1, I think, or Romans 1. And then it's mentioned in 1 Corinthians 10, I think, and in 1 Timothy. So this issue, it is addressed in the Bible. That's why people can kind of make the case, just like slavery is addressed in the Bible. You can say, see here, there's no verses about how we shouldn't have slaves. There's 100 verses about how to treat slaves. So that's why the Southern Baptist Convention formed, to say we should be able to keep our slaves. It's here in the Bible. But of course, no, it's not. No, it's not. The Bible is about liberation and freedom. So the 3 times that occurs in the New Testament, people point to that and say, I'm sticking with Scripture. Oh, there's a couple comments. I'll try to get to those. I'm sorry. This one will be like kind of a monologue, and then we'll go from there. I don't think that that's fair or accurate to look at those verses. First of all, there's a word that Paul uses that's translated. It was never translated the way that we translate it now, to homosexuality. And secondly, even if you say, I think that word should be translated to homosexuality, you have bigger issues. What we want to, when you say, I just stick with the Bible, where the Bible says it and that settles it. I've heard that before. That's not a very thoughtful position. And we can't figure it out. We have to do what's called hermeneutics, which is taking the Bible. What does the Bible say? What is it in its context? What does it mean for the audience that it was written to? And how do we apply that today? So there's an entire study of hermeneutics that deals with how to do this. And if you want to take hermeneutics and just throw it in the trash and be like, the Bible says it, and I believe it, and that settles it, I understand that that's the easiest position, but it's very lazy, and it's very, it falls apart. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, because it's the same issue why we can't figure out if women should be pastors, women in ministry. The Bible talks about this too in 1 Corinthians, and I think in Ephesians. So we can't figure out if women should be pastors. And so the 90% of the churches say, well, it says in the Bible that they shouldn't, so they shouldn't. But they're not very consistent. Churches aren't very consistent, because then they let a female be like a ministry leader or a teaching pastor or something other than the executive pastor title. So a woman can be anything in some of these churches except the executive pastor, so that the church can say, I still stand on the Bible, because we don't let women be the executive pastor. It's a ridiculous, in my opinion, it's a ridiculous application of hermeneutics, because if you actually read 1 Corinthians, it doesn't say women shouldn't be pastors. It says women shouldn't speak in the church, period. If my wife has a question during a church service, she should remain silent and ask me when we get home. That's what it says in 1 Corinthians. So clearly that's not like, I understand why that was written to the church in Corinth then, and why that is not why that doesn't apply now. I mean, you don't hear many pastors. You'll hear a lot of churches talk about how they don't let women be pastors, but you won't hear a lot of churches that say, listen up, women, when you walk into church, quiet. But this patriarchal sort of white male dominated Christian nationalism is trying to stand on that. And it's growing. It's growing. There's a lot of voices that I try to speak out against as best I can. But you have these mega pastors with huge followings that push this stuff, and they're pushing stuff. They're moving us backwards in time. So there's a huge. I've done some videos about some of these Christian nationalist pastors that I have a problem with, because I think what they're doing is destroying the gospel, in my opinion. And I'm passionate about the gospel, and I know a lot of you may be as well. If you are just curious about the Bible, I should finish. Of course, I would love to have anybody in the LGBTQ community here, and I know a lot of folks' responses is, you're just loving them right into hell. If you don't talk about their sin that's clear in the New Testament, you're not doing them any service. You're causing a lot of problems. I don't agree with that for a lot of reasons that we can discuss. This idea of love the sinner, hate the sin. Another part of the reason that I don't like it at all is because I've never heard it with someone referring to their own sin. It's always somebody else's. So when I say love the sinner, when I hear love the sinner, hate the sin, the person that says that is not referring to their own sin. They're referring to somebody else's sin. If we are to hate sin, we should start, I think, with ourselves. And I think Jesus talked about this. I think he was pretty clear that he had a whole parable where he's just like, just worry about what you have. You have planks, several of them, in your own eye, and you're worrying about somebody else. The way I understand, and he says, do not judge. Do not judge. And I know somebody will go to John 10 and be like, but he talks about how we should judge righteously. If you want to judge, go for it. I'm not comfortable with it, because it's pretty clear, I think, that if you decide to be judgmental, the measure that you use will be used against you. We are called to love people. What I think we've done is, now you'll have people that say, well, what does it mean to love people? Doesn't loving people mean calling out their sin? No, it doesn't. Let's worry about ourselves, our own sin. If we conquer that, and I get to a point where I don't feel like I have anything to work on, I will concern myself with the sin of others. Whether or not it's sin is a different discussion. I don't think so. Like I said, I don't think, number one, I'm not confident that that's how the translation of, what's the word, some biblical scholar would know, and I think arsenokoitai or something like that Paul uses. He's the first one to ever use it. So no, there's no frame of reference in the first century of what does this word mean. He used it for the first time. He coined that term, and it has been translated differently throughout time. Let's say you think that that's the word. You also have to then apply that and be consistent. If you hold that position, then proudly say, I don't think women should talk in church at all. If they have questions, they should ask their husbands when they get home. There's a lot that changes with culture, and this idea that we shouldn't change. Even when I hear things about like folks that are deconstructing, I understand that. Maybe people are deconstructing and they're somewhere along the way, or maybe they've deconstructed completely and they would say, I'm no longer a Christian anymore, I'm out, and I'm doing my own thing now, either as an agnostic or as an atheist, or maybe they're still believers, but they're on their own, like I said. I understand this idea of deconstruction. My faith has always been changing, and I don't know how it shouldn't. It seems like the idea is that if your faith changes, or you change your position on things, you're getting weaker. Your faith is sort of falling apart. I mentioned in a video a few days ago that, like, my position, I think people would say that my position on the LGBTQ community is either less Christian, a little less Christian, and a little less biblical. And I don't think that's the case at all. I've yet to hear someone explain how they can hold such a harsh position on that and also think that women can talk in church. So yeah, it should always be changing, in my opinion. I don't know how it wouldn't. Like, the experiences that I have watching people at the end of life and learning from them has to change your personal theology, I think. I think that um, this church is obviously a Christian church, and I've done videos that'll explain, and it'll make more sense as we go. Uh, the Apostles' Creed is sort of our statement of faith. There's only 3 parts to this church. There's no money involved, at least to me. If you want to be a part of this church, consider reading a book with someone you love, or with a coworker, or somebody that, if they're up for it. Just read one book of the Bible with them in a month and pray for them through that Bible, and then invite them to do something. Maybe you do something different than the 4 things I mentioned. That's great. Maybe you're already part of something different. I'd love to hear what it is, and maybe we could try it. But we have to do something. I think sometimes we think, at least with the school lunch thing, I've had conversations with people, is it the church's responsibility to make sure kids have lunch money, or is it the government's? And I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, but there's kids that have negative balances. So either way, somebody's like, we're dropping the ball somewhere. So you could have the government saying the church should do it, or the church saying the government should do it, but at the end of the day, nobody's doing it. So I feel like we have an opportunity to do that. I am encouraged, as dark of time as we are in, I'm encouraged for a few reasons. This is an opportunity for us to stand out by the way that we love one another. We live in a world with very little love, a lot of division, a lot of hatred, a lot of tribalism, a lot of dejection and depression and anxiety, all of which is fair, all of which I struggle with too. A lot of fear about what's coming in the months and years ahead. It's fair, especially if you have little ones. But we have an opportunity to stand out, I think, by the way that we love one another. Jesus talked about this. I think maybe that verse also applies today more than ever. I think I am the way, the truth, and the life applies today more than ever. I think people will know that you are my disciples by the way that you love one another, also applies today more than ever. We'll have to talk more about what does it mean to love, because that becomes the question that people bring up. Doesn't it mean to point out their sin or to hate their sin? So really, to love someone, doesn't it really mean to hate their sin, which really just comes across to them as hating them? That's a big twist from Jesus saying, they will know you're my disciples by the way that you love one another, to we should hate their sin, and they may feel hated by us, and that's okay because we're hating their sin, and that's a holy thing to do. I think that's disastrous. I think someone that says, what does it mean to really love somebody? Kind of makes me sad. I hope they know the answer to that. I hope they've had an experience where they spend time with somebody and they feel loved. I hope they could read a gospel and they would feel loved. But I mentioned that I think things like empathy are being challenged. Things like love are being challenged. Core parts of Jesus's ministry and Jesus's teaching and the examples of Jesus's life are falling by the wayside under this Christian nationalism, and that breaks my heart. I'm too passionate about this gospel to not do anything. Like I said, life was easier for me when I was just a hospice chaplain. I don't really want to do this. I feel a responsibility to do this. I feel obligated to speak out. If you care about something or someone, in this case, if you care about the gospel and you see it being distorted as awfully as it's being distorted, I can't stay quiet. And like I said, I'm not a pastor. I'm not the most, my gifting is at the bedside of hospice patients. I do some public speaking a handful of times a year. It's usually officiating a funeral. But I got to try. So to the folks out there that are trying, I'm in. I know there's people like the real Joe Smith. I know there's a guy named Vin. I know like B. Creamer, or Benjamin Creamer is a pastor that's on social media trying and doing a great job. He's got a good following and he's making a big impact. And there's other ones too. I saw a new one, Reverend Carla, I think is her name. She's fabulous. But like I said, and I love what she's doing, and I'm encouraged by her posts. But this, in my mind, this is our responsibility to fight. I had a couple interactions with a couple of black women on on Threads, some back and forth, and one of them essentially said, like, yeah, this is on you guys. You created this white Christian nationalism. You address it. And I said, you're absolutely right. This should not be their fight to fight. Um, so I am going to try, and I'm going to do the best I can to articulate why I think we came up with the reasons that we came up with. They will become self-evident, I think, one at a time. But I think number 10, the first one that I heard, that we are kind of biblically illiterate, is tough. It's going to be tough to combat Christian nationalism if we have a generation of biblically illiterate people. So when you have these folks that are having a big impact on young audiences, like your Charlie Kirks and these Mark Driscolls and these Josh Howards, these big, big voices, all white male voices that are pushing this Christian nationalism, but they got 10 million people listening to them, a lot of them young. And so I hear that there's a lot of young folks going to church and going to get plugged into a church. My initial thought is that's great news. That's great news, right? They're going to go hear the gospel. But there's a huge part of me that's like, that's terrifying. What, are they getting this Christian nationalist version of Christianity? Is that what they're joining when they go to these churches? Because if that's the case, like, it's great that these churches, that young folks are returning to church, but it's scary if they are returning to churches that are pushing Christian nationalism, and if they're devoid of the Bible, if it's a church that teaches that empathy is sin and that we should love the sinner and hate the sin, if that's the messages that that young folks are getting when they get plugged into a church, that's going to be a problem for generations ahead. So we got to try. I don't know if it'll work or not, but I'm optimistic. I feel like Christian nationalism never wins historically. And that gives me some encouragement. It may be rough in the years ahead. And like I said, maybe it's not as bad as I think it is. There are people who think that we are already a full-on fascist country with Christian nationalism already pervasive in the government. And you can see that. You can see this lady that's like a White House something, faith director or something. She's absolutely bonkers. She's got, yeah. And they're trying to put the 10 Commandments in the schools in Texas and Bibles in the schools here in Oklahoma. So you see it happening. Some people think we're already there. Some people think we're heading in that direction. But either way, I think we should be prepared. And I think the only way that you can combat Christian nationalism is with some amount of biblical literacy. And it builds community. So, as I've said before, I always would welcome anyone to read. Please don't think you can't do it. If you want to go to Read the Bible 3 and see, but try it. Just try it with me or with the spouse or by yourself. I think we're going to read Matthew, the book of Matthew. It's the first book of the New Testament, starting August 1st. So in the month of August, we're going to read the book of Matthew. I would love for you to try it. Pray for each other and do something to help people. I think that that's what the church should be at its core. I think everything that we add to that causes problems. As soon as we add money to the church, I've said this before, if somebody gave me a church and said, I wouldn't be a good pastor, but if somebody gave me a church and said, I donate this building to Ryan, use it as a church, this is what I would do with that church, and there would be 3 people there. There would be 3 people at my church. Because it's not a cellar, right? And we would come every Sunday or whenever we would gather, and we would just read for 45 minutes a book of the Bible and talk about it and pray for each other and then go do something to help people and then go home. And there would be 3 people until I did a message about joy or hope or some topical sermon that just sort of used a couple of Bible verses here and there. I used a couple of stories from my life that were kind of fun. I used, current event type of stuff or TikTok dance, like a new trendy TikTok dance. I would get 100 people in that church. If I told folks that if they came to that church, they would be healed or they could be healed, I could get 1,000 people in that church. That's a big problem here. I've mentioned this. This was reason number 9 or 11 or something like that, is folks left the church because of theological disagreements. They were told by their church that they were going to be healed of their cancer or whatever the disease was. And then it didn't happen. And the family, some of the family, leave the church because of that, because of that theology. They were promised, they had some prophet or somebody that came into their church and said, I know there's a woman over here that has cancer, and I just want you to know that you're going to be fully restored and fully healed. And they received that and believed it. And 4 months later, they come onto hospice, and they're devastated, of course. Their faith is shaken, if it's even still intact. And they leave the faith. I wish I could talk to some of those, to the pastors of these churches. Please be more careful. Like these prophets that just run around and tell everybody you're going to be miraculously healed has such a negative, it's such a bad idea. And I understand people will like to have hope, and they like to, and I understand miracles happen. I'm not a cessationist. I'm not somebody who thinks that miracles don't still occur. But selfishly, it makes things very difficult for a hospice chaplain to go in and say, hey, they'll tell me, hey, we're here and we know mom's going to be miraculously healed because a prophet told us. And I have to be so careful how I tiptoe around that. You can't prepare for death if that's what if they're certain that they're going to be healed. How do we talk about death and dying? How do we talk about getting funeral arrangements or being prepared at all if everybody thinks because some false prophet came in and said you're going to be healed, and then it doesn't happen? I had this happen recently. I won't go into the details of it, but I watched the family walk away from the faith because these prophets came in and told this person that they were going to be healed, and then it doesn't happen. I feel like we have to be more careful with things like this. Last thing about truth, like I talked about, it's getting harder to decipher what is true and what is not. And I don't think that's going to get better anytime soon. I think soon it will get increasingly more difficult to discern what is true and what is not. And it's for that reason that I think Jesus said 2,000 years ago, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So if you're seeking truth, you're not sure what's true or what's not, he said, I am the truth. And I know, oh no. I think I have 5 minutes. Okay, I'll finish up. I'm going to finish with the truth real quick. Not that I have the truth. I know a lot of folks will say, true for me and not for you. This may take more time than 5 minutes. And whenever I get kicked out of here, I'll get kicked out of here. But we are at a time where truth is very subjective. So something can be true for me, but not for you. And I remember the first time I heard this, I think it was like Pharrell Williams or Oprah in like 2008. They got in and they said, I'm going to speak my truth. And I remember vividly hearing that, and I thought, that is a fascinating take. So now everybody will have their own truth. I understand it subjectively. For example, I think nuts in brownies is horrific. Some people like it. So my truth would be that they're horrible. Somebody else may have that and say that my truth is that they're good. That's not a matter of truth. That's a matter of taste and opinion. A matter of truth is something significant. It happened or it didn't. I think we've lost the concept of truth as a whole, or we're losing it. So when I say something like, I believe it is true, the death and resurrection of Christ, I believe that is true. Someone would say, well, that's your truth. That's not my truth. And I understand that. I want to be respectful of everybody's opinion. But if I say something like, I don't think the Holocaust happened, I think most people would say they would not say that that's my truth. They would say you are objectively wrong. And that it'd probably be offensive to hold that position. I'm sure some people do. I think I've heard some people that do. But when you look at something like the death or resurrection of Christ, that is either true or it's not. I think it's a discussion we'll have to unpack at another time. But either that happened or it didn't. If I believe it's true, I am either right or I am wrong. Or there's an agnostic approach that I think it makes no difference. Maybe we can't know whether or not it happened. But someone that says it didn't happen, I believe it didn't happen, they're either right or I am right. Not in an arrogant way, but just the concept of truth, I think, is under fire, has been for 15 years, 20 years. Um, and I think if you would agree to read one of the Gospels, I would love to read it with you, like I said, or read it with a family member, pray for them, and do something for people in need. That's the goal of this community. It's kind of meant for people who have left the church for one reason or another. We'll try doing this again. Maybe I'll be a little less nervous and a little less tired. Thanks to anybody that watched, and I'm praying for you guys. See you.